been on strike for more than 2 weeks now, and management continues to be incredibly stubborn, and the negotiation tactics that they are rolling out now are absolutely appalling. They've rolled out a scare tactic in an effort to try to break the union. You see, Canada Post is attempting to play the victim here by claiming that they're down nearly 10 million parcels since the strike began, and their backlogs are growing, so now Canada Post is issuing layoffs. Workers are getting phone calls from the union telling them that they're being laid off and that their benefits are being cut. Interesting that they do it in the way that provides the least paperwork possible. Funny that. Probably a coincidence. But Canada Post insists that because of the labor disruptions, they had to take steps to adjust their operations. And they made an absolutely horrifying statement saying, quote, "That means the previously expired collective agreements no longer apply, and the terms and conditions of employment for employees have changed." Think about that for a second. They think that good faith bargaining is mass layoffs once the contract expires and slashing benefits in the process. So they let the contract expire by negotiating in bad faith and then lay everybody off because of course they can, because the contract expired. Seems super legit. Totally unrelated, but the Postal Workers Union is fighting this in court because of course they are. This is nuts. Like, why are we accepting a public institution acting this evil? And the union has made it very clear that the Post is straight up lying to the government about the issues that they face. They want to increase the part-time mix to more than 50% of the workforce. They want to make it so that people aren't eligible for benefits until they work over 1,000 hours while working part-time. But more than that, the representation is that there's no way to increase revenues. But there's a very straightforward way. The government could just properly fund Canada Post. Instead of this run it like a business nonsense, they could, run it like a public service, like it's supposed to be. That's sort of the point of it. Like if Canada Post was meant to be run as a business, it would be a business. It's not. It's a public service, and it needs to be treated as such. That means providing it a cash injection when needed, because Canada Post doesn't just exist to serve the interests of business. It exists to serve Canadians. That's why you see so many of these sad stories about how the lack of postal access is going to make life so difficult for people. Because they need Canada Post. If there were viable alternatives in the marketplace, why wouldn't these people be using them? They can't because they don't have service available. Because it's not profitable to serve them. The whole idea of public services is to create a situation where we are providing services for people who are not always profitable to serve. Because they're people and deserve basic services. I'm from Saskatchewan. It was incredibly cost ineffective to provide electrical service to rural communities. No private power company wanted to do it, but Tommy Douglas recognized that rural communities needed electricity and created Sask Power in order to get that to them. A public utility that is still active. I have to pay my power bill after I record this. To Sask Power. I gotta get on that. Editing, Steve. Pay your bill. We have some of the lowest utility rates in the country because our public sector services are able to hold costs down and provide them to rural communities. But nope. Run Canada Post like a business. But if you think these layoffs are just cold-hearted, it is so much more than that. It is evil. And that's why I want to highlight this story, which was originally covered by Kimberly Molina from CBC News. This guy is named Mark Karen, and he has cancer. He previously went through a battle with cancer 2 years ago, and in May, he found out that his cancer has returned, and now he's on medication that costs around $2,000 a day. But when the Canada Post workers went on strike, Canada Post stopped his benefits. This means he can't get his cancer medication covered and has to pay for it out of pocket. Think about that for a second. The instant they had the chance, Canada Post slashed benefits for the workers in the middle of a negotiation process. Does that strike you as particularly good faith? Like now they're sending out layoff notices. This is a public utility acting unconscionably evilly. So the real question is, why are they doing this? Why would Canada Post, who is allegedly a good organization, acting so badly? And the answer is because they are trying to break the union. This has been a big trend in Canadian public affairs lately. Union busting is the hottest new trend for fall. You may have thought it was wearing your pajamas in public, but no, union busting. You see, what they're really trying to do here is to force the federal government to step in and end the strike, making it get so ugly that the federal government feels like they have no choice. And the federal government's shown that they're willing to do this again and again and again. They've ended a rail strike, a port strike, and what's to stop them from ending another? What's a third strike breaking between friends? And that's the whole issue here. It's becoming increasingly clear that labor rights are negotiable. They only really exist when they're convenient, which is missing the point of rights entirely. The whole point of rights is that you have unbreakable protections that remain in place even when it's inconvenient for those in power. But not anymore. Your labor rights are a little more wiggly. We can get rid of those whenever we particularly want. Lucky us. And it's not just happening to postal workers, airport workers, or rail workers. It's happening everywhere. in every sector of our economy. Just look at the way that Alberta is treating its public sector education workers. Education support workers in Edmonton were getting ready to strike. Education support workers in Edmonton were ready to strike when they were ordered before the Disputes Inquiry Board, days before they were about to go on the picket line. And things are still stuck at that board. They're at an impasse waiting for a formal, non-binding recommendation. Existing power structures are there to provide delay tactics, stalling tactics, and to undermine the union's negotiating positions. If their work is that valuable, if you need it that bad, pay them. It's not complicated. But no, they want to drag it out so the workers will work for discounted rates for as long as possible. Liberalism. Edmonton's education support workers have not received a significant wage increase in a decade. But the government's going to use the power of state to undermine their ability to negotiate. Any government that steps into a labor negotiation is not a government for the people, unless they are stepping in on the sides of workers and demanding the employer negotiate in good faith. Or, if it's a public sector employer, ensuring that that public sector employer is properly funded in order to compensate its workers. Beyond that, sit down and shut up, the government. And it's also worth noting that you're going to hear a lot of breathless news coverage about things like children's letters to Santa, saying that you simply can't get your children's letters to Santa, which is definitely a reason to break a union. Children's letters to Santa. Union busting. That's where we're at in Canada. But I do want to highlight that Santa would absolutely not approve of this, because Santa is in fact a union man. I direct you to the Fraternal Order of Real Bearded Santas. This is an actual 501c7 fraternity in the United States. And Santa is a damned union man. So I will hear none of your class treason about letters to Santa. Send him an email. But if you think the government screwing over unions and labor in general is limited to contract negotiations, then you must be new here. You know how you always get told that public sector pensions are so incredibly generous and that public sector workers are somehow growing fabulously wealthy the moment that they stop working? Yeah, funny thing about that. Turns out they're actually not getting paid anywhere near as much as they should be. Ottawa is currently sitting on a $9 billion surplus in public sector pensions. See, there was a $1.9 billion surplus in the public sector pension fund from last fiscal year, which is going to just get dumped into the general revenue fund. It's just going to go into the government's coffers. And in total, they're projecting changes to the pension fund that are going to add $9.2 billion to the federal budget. Think about that for a single second. These are public sector funds that were negotiated through public sector negotiations that should be paid. Their contributions are in that money. But that isn't going to stop the federal government from using public sector pensions as their own personal piggy bank. That was very hard to say. You see, they're in something called a non-permitted surplus, where they're simply holding too many funds. So rather than paying that money out to, I don't know, like the workers whose pensions it is, they're going to use it to balance the general revenue fund. Because f*** you, workers, that's why. This is what happens in Canadian politics. Workers get betrayed at every turn, and until we fight back, it is never going to stop. So you want to know what you can do to fight back? It is very straightforward. Stand in solidarity with striking public sector workers. And all striking workers, for that matter. Stand with Alberta education workers, postal workers, port workers, rail workers. When you see workers on strike, stand with them. Maybe just support strikes generally. Generally support strikes. General strike. General strike sort of vibe. General strike. General strike.